Ladies and gents, we've got some scrolling to do now in NRL Supercoach. We've got the flex position, and it's a good couple of scrolls to get down there, sitting underneath the fullback slot. And I do know a lot of people that are probably going to use it for another fullback in their side, especially with young Isaiah Iongi from the Eels. They're going to take that fullback slot likely. But let's just get into a little bit of a reaction to the opening of the NRL Supercoach with the adjusted salary cap. We do obviously have 18 playing players each and every week with 17 counting. So just think very similar to that of the big buy rounds last year in 13, 16, and 19, where it was your best 13 out of your 17, scoring players. In this case, it's the best 17 of the 18 for each of the normal rounds. And then we do get back to that best 13 in those main buy rounds. Obviously, with the extra player, the bench does not change at all. We still have the same amount of players on that, but it does mean you're going to be playing an extra guy. And what it doesn't mean is you can get an extra gun. The cash that's been introduced, it's been adjusted as well. Some of all of the players have been dropped down a little bit in their current pricing just with the addition of the extra player. So just be aware of that when you are selecting your team. But what it probably does mean is those selections throughout the season where you are picking between 2 guys on your bench or 3 guys on your bench for your last position in your 17. That now gives you the opportunity to just pick that extra guy. And a lot of the time it seemed to be the way that, if you got lucky, it was 100 compared to a 25 or a 40. And this time you can have both of those guys in your side. And obviously that lowest guy is going to drop out. So when you are looking at strategy around that, it is a little bit more of a swing from the hip style. With that extra guy, you can have one that drops out, and sometimes you might have a wing fullback, a winger or a center there that comes in and could be scoring a double and get you an 80 or 90. They could also hit you a nice 10 to 15 points, which in this case, unless there's going to be a first minute concussion or something like that, you could easily play that guy knowing that if all goes to crap and all fails, that he's going to come out of your side and not count as a scorer. The flex position obviously means you can put anyone into that position. Dual position across your team is going to help in that scenario because you can obviously only have the 2 halfbacks in general, but if you have a third flex player, they can sit into that. But obviously week to week, if you're looking to keep your 3 halfbacks in your side, you won't be able to move that halfback from the flex, right? Because you wouldn't be able to move him back into that halfback position. So in that scenario, it can help you in certain trades, whether you want to bring in one extra guy. If you do have a lot of duals in your side that you can muck around and move things around or trade out, let's just say they have a 2RF, so second row forward, and a winger/center dual on that front. If you wanted to trade out the winger or the center, move your second row forward down into that position, or move them down into the flex and bring in a 2RF. So there's a bunch of different things you can do strategy-wise to maneuver players around your side using that flex position across the 2025 season. So I think it's a really nice addition just for those annoying weeks, especially when you have a laid out, you have a guy that gets concussed in the first minute, gets injured in the first 10 minutes, whatever that is for that player. We know, I know last year we had plenty of those scenarios across almost every round. Some rounds we'd get lucky, other rounds we'd get absolutely decimated. So it would all work out pretty evenly. There would be 1 or 2 around across the season where, there would be an early out or, something happened on off field or whatever it was and they were out a certain week or concussion, out for the next week. Just gives you some flexibility around picking 18 guys from that 26. So we still have 8 on the bench. And it does mean, I think, that you're going to be having another guy in your 18 that's probably, as a starting player in your side, a 300 or 350k player on average there. You could see, obviously, if you went all cheapies, you might be able to get that 18th player to be a little bit more expensive, a 450 to 500 guy. But I imagine that it's just going to be another fringe player in round 1. But I think it's going to be very helpful in many other weeks. If you are sitting there, you might only have in 1 week 17 available players, and that's going to be completely fine. Some will have 18 and they can drop out that low one, but like we've seen with big buy rounds in 13, 16, 19, it doesn't matter too much if you have 14, 15, 16 players. You can get away with 13 really good players or solid players at that, and do the job. So you might have weeks there where the same thing occurs, where you just have the 17 available, and that should be pretty fine, I think, as well, looking into that setup. So yeah, that's the flex. Pretty stock standard. Just think of it as an extra guy, and maybe able to help you with some trade maneuvering some trades across the across the whole season, to be honest with you. And it's going to be interesting how the strategy is used around it. I think for the most part, it is going to be more around the fact that it just helps you with maneuvering trades and having potentially an extra fullback, an extra halfback, or hooker. No, I'm kidding. Won't be hooker, that's for sure. An extra half, an extra 5'8", or an extra fullback, likely, which are the smaller positions there. Let's have a quick look at a reaction at some of the prices before we end today's video. Just a quick short, sharp one in the team picker for 2025 season, and for those that are fantasy players as well, I'm looking forward to that game opening, hopefully very soon. I haven't heard any teasers yet, and I want to get cranking on some content. So Supercoach it is first, and with Supercoach anyway, I'm going to get into a lot of the teams as well, and get things moving with firstly the guys that I'd be looking into. I've already started a list for all of the positions. That'll be my next video, and then I'll get into sort of some team setup and how things are looking now that we do have the prices. But in terms of those prices, nothing stands out as ridiculous or way overvalued or way undervalued just based on their averages. Especially, we're starting off in that hooking position, and we did see Harry Grant end up as the top scorer last year via average with 70.7. And you had Damien Cook, Little, Plath, Api Coruscant, and Reece Robson all averaging a tick over 60 there, with Damien Cook moving over to Dragons, potentially sharing that role with Little. You've got the two of the three top scorers in the same team. We do get the duel. We continue to hold that with Max Plath, given he played a fair few games at hooker when JMK was injured. So he becomes a very interesting little option there. And you have three players there in Plath, in McInnes, and also Connor Watson, all at 583k and above. Very, very close together there. 583 for Connor, 585 for Cameron, and 617 for Plathy there. And I do think all three of those guys have a really solid role in their sides next year. The main kind of worry with, I think, McInnes is obviously they do lose Jack Williams, but they bring over AFB, who's one of the larger minute players in the game. And I'm not sure how that's if it's going to affect McInnes too much, given he's usually around that sort of 50 odd minutes, and depending on injuries and as such, he'll go up to the bigger minute games. But I do think having one of these guys should be pretty helpful, given there's definitely a decent amount of options there that you could plug in. And you had guys like Reece Robson, who had a really good start last year before Origin especially, and was a set and forget plug and play guy. We'll obviously get into some strategy around buys and the rest as we go along, but none of these guys have a buy in that first game. So Harry Grant, do you set and forget him up and through towards Origin, or do you go for one of these other guys with some dual, or a Robson type that is a fair bit cheaper than Harry by 100k? And that worked out really, really well last year, picking him over Harry in the early rounds especially. So there's a few things to look at with those guys. I do think that they are all of the players that seem to hold most of the value, and we'll go through that in sort of target players and guys I've got my eye on heading into a very nice long preseason. For the rest of the hookers, we don't see Smith for a while. We'll only see talented De Silva if we get an injury to Appy, but hopefully that's not the case. You've got Hands and Lussick. Are they likely to interchange between that role again? But looking at those averages now, it's pretty gross, obviously, across the season, between start and the bench. And really the big one there is, a big couple I should say, is Blake Moser in that cheap slot at 312. You've got Pete Marmazelis at 302. And you've also got Sanders Smith down a fair bit lower. So I've got some strategies and some thoughts on how to sort of plug and play that position at this point of the preseason. So I'll go through that in the next video. For the front row forward situation there, you do have a few guys that are fairly expensive. You've got three guys over 600k, four guys, over 600k that did a really awesome job last year. And it was actually a position that produced some decent scores, with Adam Fanua-Blake outperforming the top hooker in Harry Grant. And when I said in the hookers, you had six guys that average over 60, whereas in the front row forward, you had five guys that average over 60. And I do expect all of them to hit that number again. So think of the hooker and the front row forward position as very, very similar slots there. And we obviously have Terrell May moving over to the Tigers, so he could be a cheaper guy that is of interest, but we'll go through a lot of those options as we go. Front row forward seems like it'll be a position where we are looking at a few cheapies in there, as always, but they're a position right now where those cheapies aren't readily available as we speak. We'll find out a little bit more through the preseason. We have Stefano and Tino in really interesting positions, with Stefano with the new team and Tino having the dual again, which is awesome, and coming off only 2 games, averaging the 47. So he does get a little bit of a bump up, but it's much cheaper of a price than we usually get him. But the other big thing is obviously him having a bye in round 1. I still think that he would be a very good trade in if he's fit and firing. Looking through a lot of mid-rangers, there's not a lot to be excited about. There would be if you're looking at Flegler if he was fit. But this is a position now where I think, if something pops up and there's minutes available, then sweet. But a lot of these guys, they're probably going to plod between that sort of 35 to 45, 50. And you're getting down to guys like Nafahu White and the like there that could be of interest, that's for sure. Looking at the 2RF, we do have 5 players averaging 70 and above, so it's very much more a higher scoring position, and it's a position that you want to target a few more of the higher scorers. The only reason you'd target a higher scorer in a hooker or a front row forward position is to keep them in your side for the longer term, looking all the way up to Origin or something like that with Payne Haas or whatever you want to go for. Whereas the second row forward position, you're looking at guys that have a fair bit of upside there, with Barnett being one of the top front rowers, but he's in 8th position in the top second row forwards, and we've got all the way down to Ewan Aitken at 19 for guys that average 60 and above. And you're looking a couple down, you've got Isaiah Papali'i and Connor Watson, who are both interesting options, with Connor likely to play at 9 and Isaiah Papali'i coming back into the Panthers setup. But yeah, you could select a multitude of these guys in the top range, and you're probably going to be wanting, I'd say, one person at least. Probably one person at least. It'd be nice to have multiple, but one person in the 600 plus range to give you some starch up there and a guy that has some upside in that position. Even all the way down to someone like Jacob Preston, I find is a very interesting pick, but I'll discuss more of that as we get into that next video in a couple of days. So yeah, you're looking at sort of the mid-range there. It's all guys that can hit in the mid-50s, and Tino's the big sort of change in price compared to what he averaged last year. And you see all the way down here, it's all guys that have played a good amount last year, and they're priced at their average. And then Tom Gilbert, Takiaho. Gilbert didn't play last year, obviously, with his ACL injury, and hopefully he's good to go for round 1. It looks like he's a good shot for that. And then Takiaho comes back from overseas. Roosters before that, and then Manly now, so he'll be a very interesting pick for them. And then again, with the second row forward, there's a few guys around that mid-range in Gilbert, in Hilam Lukey, and all these interesting players there. Alex Seafarth is going to be interesting if he's going to be on that edge, and a few more, obviously, but we'll get to that in that next video when it's a little bit more important. In terms of our halves, we're looking at 2 guys that average over 80, and shout out to Jerome Hughes. He still couldn't pip Nathan Cleary. Yes, played double the games, and that usually helps, but Nath has some injury-affected ones in there, so 82.9 and 82.3 for those 2 guys. So absolutely tremendous season, and Nico Hines is down a lot more this year. So he was up near $1 million last year, and he's dropped a little bit, but has a partner in Trindle that does take a little bit of the shine off his scoring. Dylan Brown, a little bit cheaper than last year. But you got Sam Walker coming back from injury. Daly Cherry Evans, one of the cheapest starting prices we've seen from him for a while. Mitch Moses really cheap as well at $628, and then you've got Jerome Luai at $582. So it's an interesting position. You might want to look at that slightly cheaper range. Jamal Fogarty had a great start to last year as well. He's priced up a little bit on that, but yeah, ended up with a 54.7, slowing down after his injury. And then, a few other guys in the cheaper realms that you could potentially look at if things go well. Isaiah Katoa at $390 is interesting. Lewis Dodd comes over to the Bunnies as well at $336. Jamie Humphries, he's one game for 104, so they popped him at a 305 price tag, which is nice because if he does get his opportunity at 104, they could have popped him up at a 5-600, and that would have been annoying. And as we said, Sandon Smith, if he gets the start at 237, will be fun. In our 5/8 position, we have one guy over 70, so it's a little bit less of upside compared to that in the halfback, but it was only 3 guys that average more than that 70 mark in the halves compared to the one there for Campbell, who does continue with that dual 5'8" and fullback, surprisingly enough. But there you go. Tamari Martin keeps his high price after a really, really good season, deputising for Johnson plenty. Matt Burton I find is an interesting one straight up, but all these guys are priced at their averages from last year. Munster a little bit cheaper based on previous pedigree, being a 70+ type scorer. Tom Dearden I think has a better year coming this year, but 61 was a good improvement for him on previous. As we said with Luai, Blaise Talangi unfortunately priced according to his average. Did play 19 games though. He had just had a couple of too many tons basically when he was playing out in the centres and on the wing there for Blaze. But yeah, Tyron Wishart a cracking season as well, 556. If he gets an opportunity at some point, then he's obviously discounted a bit based on some bench games. Jaden Sullivan's just moved to the South, I believe. So yeah, reading a bit of chatter there around, wow, they mustn't have liked Ilias and where he was at to take on Sullivan's contract there. So that's interesting. And then Metcalf coming off a 50 average last year, but only played the 7 games. So he gets a slight discount on that one, when you can see being priced at a 50 average would be at 494. So he gets a 50k discount, which is a little bit fun. Josh Rogers, a little bit of discount on him as well. And yeah, you're getting to the cheaper guys from that point. And then the wingers and the centers. So we've got a lot of high price guys. We have 7 guys that average 70+, which means this is a very, very high scoring position. And it's a position that I neglected a little too much to begin the year last year. And in my review, that's something I deeply went through. And I'm actually going to reveal, wrote all that out. I'll put that review out over the next little bit as well. I think that'll be a good fun one for you guys to see. That's for sure. With Val Holmes in at 80, Lomax in at 79, both moving teams, which makes it interesting. The only 2 in that top 4 that are staying is Herbie and Kiraz. And then Dom Young, 71, with that mammoth score in that first 20 minutes, which is crazy. Dane Gagai, Brian to fill out the rest of that. And then Garrick with 3 concussion games, still managed 69. Nice. And then we've got a couple of the Sharks boys, Mulatalo, Iro. So yes, plenty of guys that did an awesome job through that period, and so many guys all the way down to Connor Tracy at 22 that averaged 60+. There's a lot of guys that could come in and do an awesome job. It's just going to be about selecting the guys with the best start and the clearest role, whether it's a goal kicking center or winger like Holmes and Lomax. What comes up this year and who becomes a great option is going to be the big question mark, which we don't know yet. In all those guys, who's it going to be in the 500s? Is it going to be Greg Marzu? Is it going to be Campbell Graham, who is priced at 505 at a 52 average, which we know he can be a lot higher than that. Skelton comes over and does get a little bit of a discount, only playing 4 games, but averaging 64 in that time. If the Tigers are humming early on, then he could be an interesting pick, that's for sure. And yeah, we'll get into cheapies and the like later, but Casey McLean with a 50 average got a little bit of a discount down to a 45 average in that one. And then Mark Nwanganita Waze. I haven't said it. I don't think I've ever said that properly before. So there you go. 438k, priced at a 44 after his 64 effort there. So yeah, some interesting ones there for sure. Jack Howarth at 426. I think he's going to be an interesting pick as well, but did only average 43 in his 13 games. So we'll see how that one plays out. And then to finish things off in our fullback slot, we do have a couple of top guns, with Tedesco being the top scorer in Supercoach last year at 94, followed by Tom Trbojevic at 89. And then Latrell Mitchell at 88 with his 11 games. He doesn't get any discount on that. 11 games was enough. But you've got Dylan Edwards and then Callum Ponga all averaging over 80. So fullback is the slot to target for the high upside guys, but you do have to pay a pretty penny for those guys, that's for sure. And then Drinkwater at 78, Walsh at 75, Keeney at 72. So very impressive by those guys there. And there's obviously plenty of guys that are at a slightly cheaper price, in guys like Pappenhausen, who looked really good in that final series as well. And then it's a bit hard to select some guys from there with so many points available up top. We've obviously got Isaiah Iongi at a 232 price. So even with the one game of 47, they did drop him down, which was nice for us Supercoach players, that's for sure. Man, we're early, obviously. It's still a team picker season, so we don't even have the game fully opened yet, which will happen a little bit into the new year. I'm super excited for this season, guys. That's just my general thoughts on the positions, on the flex position there, and how that's going to play out going forward. that's my first video for Supercoach for the year. I'll get out to my sort of players on notice early on in the season. I'll get that video out next, and we'll dive deeper into them across the off season, the preseason, and then I'll get my video out there around going through my side and the mistakes that were made last year, because there were plenty, and I've learnt plenty from that. So thanks guys for being here, and we'll catch you in the next Supercoach video.